Hey guys, it's Alec Torelli, the poker player, and in this video, you're going to be let in on a secret. Once you know it, it will change the way you think about life and success. It's what Einstein calls the most powerful force in the universe. Stay right here. One summer afternoon, while my friend and I were paddling in the Pacific Ocean in our usual spot on 46th Street in Newport Beach, an invitation would change the direction of my life forever. "Do you want to come play poker at my house today?" he asked. You see, Chris Moneymaker had just won the World Series of Poker main event, turning $100 into $2.5 million. And in the process, transformed poker from a game played by gangsters in smoke-filled back rooms into an edgy, cool game played by the masses. It'd be convenient if I could report that after winning $12 my first time playing at my friend's house, that the rest was history. But nothing is further from the truth. Despite being some of the best times of my life, those early years were filled with roller coaster ups and downs. I grew and busted a bankroll more times than I could count. Sometimes as much as several grand, which was near infinite money to a 16-year-old high school kid. 4 years later, one Sunday morning, while I was living in Melbourne, Australia, I woke up at 4:30 in the morning to play what was then the biggest online poker tournament in history on a website called Full Tilt Poker. I, along with 3,217 other hopefuls, ponied up $500 entry fee to compete for over $1.5 million in payouts and a grand prize of over $250,000. 16 hours later, I won. To the world, I became quite literally an overnight success. Flush with cash, I then used that money to compete in higher stakes games, and in 2007, I went on to become one of the biggest winners in the world, making over $1 million on Full Tilt Poker alone. I don't tell you this story to gloat, but rather to share the lesson I learned from becoming an overnight success in poker. Looking from the outside, it seems that all of the progress that I made in my poker career happened in the year 2007. What people too often neglect are the 4 years I spent laying the groundwork before having any major results. Those were the years I lived on the grind, quite literally, reading books, crunching numbers, and spending so much time thinking about the game of poker that I actually saw cards in my dreams. All this happened really before anyone was watching. You see, in order to become an overnight success, you have to plant the seeds with hard work, tend to them, and then watch them slowly grow over time. This is the period in which the results are only felt by the individual who's working, and they can also feel insignificant. Other people really don't take notice. The initial period is often extremely difficult, filled with small victories and bigger setbacks, and mostly hardship. It's the ultimate test of how bad one wants something, and because of that, it's also the time where most people give up. Quitting is not necessarily a sign of failure. Instead, I believe it's the universe's way of filtering out those who don't want it bad enough. A divine nudge that you're headed in the wrong direction. Perhaps more than anything, my experience in becoming an overnight success in poker has taught me this. Success compounds over time. So what does compounding success mean? It means that it follows an exponential growth chart. In practicality, one will struggle for a long period of time before it feels as if their success is then exploding overnight. Society, who fails to understand how exponential growth works, has coined this term an overnight success. It's simply not true. An overnight success happens when one arrives at what's referred to as the elbow of the exponential graph, the point at which it begins to tilt upwards. Microsoft is just one of the countless examples of the power of exponential success compounding over time. Let's take a look at 3 more across various industries, and most importantly, how we can apply these lessons to our own lives. We'll begin with something we all know well, Amazon. While there are many metrics one can use to measure success, let's just use the most common, share price. Here's a graph of Amazon's share price since inception. This is a near perfect exponential growth chart, but notice the price movement, or lack thereof, from 1995 to 2009. It was nearly flat. Then it hit the elbow of the exponential chart and it skyrocketed. Now, while growth doesn't always follow this pattern, nor necessarily take this long, many companies follow this model of explosive growth after an initial period of going largely unnoticed. Here's a chart documenting Uber rides taken. Again, exponential. I could show you countless examples, but you get the idea. Second, here's Warren Buffett. Most people know him as one of the greatest investors of all time. His biography, fittingly titled Snowball, is a fascinating read. What most people don't know is that the vast majority of his wealth came in recent years. Take a look. Buffett grinded for decades while letting his net worth slowly compound. Then, it quite literally snowballed. Number 3, sequencing the human genome. The Human Genome Project began in 1990 with a 15-year estimated deadline. 7.5 years into the project, the scientists announced they had only decoded a mere 1% of the genome. Pundits deemed the project a failure. The few who understood exponential growth, however, realized it was in fact near completion. With the rate of progress doubling, it only takes another 7 years to go from 1% to 100%. In fact, in 2003, exactly 7 years later, the first human genome was successfully sequenced. So how does this phenomenon of exponential growth apply to success in life? Well, if people understood how the success model worked, they wouldn't lament about the seemingly trivial growth in the beginning, but instead see it for what it is, laying the groundwork for the exponential curve to come, for the elbow. We are taught to think in linear terms. If you take 30 steps in a linear fashion, 1, 2, 3, etc., you'll arrive at 30. Most people get this. But success doesn't always work that way. It grows exponentially. If you take 30 steps in an exponential way, you arrive at 1 billion. Great leaders have intuitively known this for centuries. Abraham Lincoln is perhaps most famous for his quote, "Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I will spend the first 4 sharpening the axe." If you graphed out the process of chopping down the tree, it would give you the illusion that all of the progress happened in the last 2 hours. When in fact, there was work being done the entire time. Humans aren't hardwired to understand exponentials. Albert Allen Bartlett once said, "The greatest shortcoming of the human race is the inability to understand the exponential function." Lack of understanding of exponential growth can have severe consequences in real life. Take COVID-19, for example. Many people were downplaying the coronavirus and couldn't see how a mere 100 cases was a threat to society. But in fact, this was obvious to anyone that understood how the disease multiplies. Followers of this channel, for example, know I began sounding the alarm in February, not because I'm some genius. In fact, I don't know the first thing about medicine, but I do understand how exponential growth works. And with COVID-19, since the infected person passes the disease to an average of 2.5 others, the virus spreads exponentially. With case numbers doubling every 3 to 6 days, 100 cases today means 10,000 in a few weeks. And we all know what happened. Exponential growth is an incredible phenomenon, so much so that Einstein called it the most powerful force in the universe. Understanding how it works in your life can help you stay on course and remain positive during the seemingly uneventful period before the growth takes off. This is crucial for so many people quit too early. If you've been putting in the work for years and don't feel like you're progressing, it may simply mean you haven't reached the elbow. Hang in there. So how long does it take to become an overnight success? Probably longer than you think. One of my favorite quotes from Bill Gates is, "Most people overestimate what they can do in a year." The good news? He goes on to say that most people also underestimate what they can do in a decade. You see, what Gates is saying is that it takes longer than you think to become an overnight success, but you can do more than you think in the long run. This actually makes perfect sense, as I believe it accurately conveys how people misunderstand exponential growth and how compounding success actually work. Namely, people expect more progress in the short term and then underestimate the development in the long term, just like they did with COVID-19. Now, there is a caveat to the exponential growth model and compounding success model that's worth mentioning. And that is that it only works if one is actually a favorite to win in the game they're playing. Just because exponentials exist, they're by no means guaranteed. Many never hit the elbow because they're playing the wrong game, their business idea is abysmal, or their execution is just poor. Ego often gets in the way as well. I believe it's up to each of us to understand whether we're headed in the right direction and if the elbow is actually coming in due time somewhere down the road, or if we need to pivot to a destination where our success is more likely. It's one of life's greatest challenges, and that is on you. I'm Alec Torelli. Thanks for watching. Hit that like button and subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.